Hi, Pastor Jarrett here, and I want to talk about something real quick. John MacArthur has had a church service indoors, full capacity, this past weekend. And he said it wasn't intentionally done. He had been, for the last couple of weeks, preaching sermons in an empty auditorium, and people slowly start to show up each week. And this past week, he had a full church gathering. He also released a letter that pastors can also sign, saying that they believe it's time for churches to be able to open up, and that government has overreach and breach of the freedom of religion that's part of the United States Constitution, and that it is time for churches to gather again, and that we need to obey God rather than government. Now, there's something true to what John MacArthur is saying. It is true that it is time for the church to get together again. Now, it's also important to note that when this first happened, John MacArthur also gave a message saying that, before, at the very beginning, all the way back in March, when his church stopped meeting together for months, he originally told them, we're doing this because we're loving our brothers and sisters in Christ. It was a deadly disease, and so he was concerned. And so originally he wasn't meeting, and he thought we should listen to the government, what they have to say. They have a good recommendation. We should love our brothers and sisters in Christ. And now he has changed his opinion, and part of it is just because of what we've seen. Though the virus is dangerous, however, is not as dangerous as we thought it was going to be. And for John MacArthur, he really thinks it's really not that dangerous. And so he's not as concerned about it. And the other thing that has triggered this is also the fact that despite churches not being able to open up, protesters have been gathering, sometimes with mass, sometimes without mass. They chant, they sing, and there have been riots as well. And government seems to not have a problem with these protesters getting together in large gathering and protesting, chanting, shouting. And basically, John MacArthur and other pastors are saying is, hey, if they can gather together to do that, why can't the church? And I think that's a fair question. I think that's a legitimate challenge to what the government has told churches to do. And I think, yes, the churches should be able to gather. Now, at the same time, I do think there's something unwise about how they approach the church service at John MacArthur's church, just because they were at full capacity and a good number of people were not wearing masks. Now, I know there's some people who don't think there's any value in wearing masks, and they think that there's a problem with that. They think it's dehumanizing, and I understand all those concerns. However, it is still a deadly disease, and if the wrong person gets it, it could kill someone. There was another church recently, I can't remember the name of it, but they were having a revival service over the weekend, and by the end of it, everyone, all 40 people who are meeting in the church, all got the COVID-19. And that's what we don't want to happen in churches. We don't want to be so anxious and so rushing to want to gather again that we don't end up spreading the virus to everyone in our congregation, because that's still not the loving thing to do. And not only that, but we would be spreading it to other people as well, and that's not good. So I think, though I do agree the church needs to gather together, we need to find a way to do it safely. Now, at my church this past weekend, we also met, but we met outside, and we had some social distancing. We did do singing because we were social distance. Most of us were wearing masks, and then therefore singing really isn't a bad thing, especially when you're outside. I think that is one of the more reasonable choices to do. There was a church who's been doing it ever since the beginning, and I believe it's in Arizona, where they do church service in their cars, and the pastor's out in the parking lot and preaching the sermon, and they can have music, and they just tune into it either through the radio or through the Bluetooth, and they get to hear the sermon, and they get to gather together, and they also get to be safe. If we do get to a point where we do inside service, we also, I don't think there's anything wrong with the social distancing and wearing masks. I think to some degree we have to do the best to protect our congregation from the COVID-19. However, at the same time, the church does need to meet. We are told not to neglect meeting together, that we need to gather together for worship and praise, and that we are called ecclesia, the called out ones. We're called to love one another, and it's hard to love one another in Christ if we're not in proximity to each other. It's also true, watching a sermon online is not the same as watching a sermon in person. Singing worship songs in your at home is nice, but it's not the same as in person. Seeing each other on Zoom and Bible studies on Zoom is nice, but it is not the same as doing in person. And so I think we do need to get to a point where we're getting together, we're meeting, but we're doing it safely. I think we should get to a point where we should be able to do Bible studies again, and maybe just doing social distancing in the Bible study. I don't see any reason why we can't do that as a church. I know my church, the board, does get together, and we do meet, and we have our social distancing, and that's the best thing. I think the church needs to start meeting together. We need to start encouraging each other. We need to start praying together. We need to start loving each other. And really, it doesn't look like anything is going to change with shelter in place and all this. And other businesses are slowly starting to open up. There's no reason why the church can't start slowly opening up, as long as it does it safely. And so I just wanted to give my few thoughts about this. But like I said, we need to be, the church needs to be meeting together. We need to be praying that the government would allow churches to open up so we can do it legally. But it might come a point where we might need to just do it despite what government says, to do what we know is honoring to God and loving our brothers and sisters in Christ. It might require us to have a little backbone and a little courage and believe that God will be for us, and we'll see where it goes from there. And so let's move forward as a church, bravely and courageously worshiping God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength. Have a blessed day.